All right, sounds good. One of my favorite stories in all the years that we've been involved with Camp TaKumTA is the story of Abe Trubulsy from Colchester.
Yep.
And he couldn't be here because it's finals week for this semester in college.
Yes, it is.
He's at a UVM, right?
He is.
Yep. But his mom has been here answering phones all morning. Mario, welcome in.
Thank you.
It's always good to see you in here. And I know you're a big-time supporter of camp. Your family has been touched by cancer in a number of ways. Start out, first of all, with Abes Story, because we thought that story wasn't going to end well, right?
Yeah, so Abe, in his senior year in high school, he was 17, this was in 2015, had been complaining for quite a while of having cancer in his shin. And I said, what makes you think you have cancer in your shin? And he said, I have this painful bump on my shin. I said, Abe, the really good news is that your whole lacrosse team has the same cancer. So, go off, go play. And I just completely blew him off.
Right.
And a couple of weeks later, his girlfriend called me and said, you're being totally irresponsible. We think he has cancer. You need to take him to the doctors. So I did that, and he told the doctor his story, and the doctors kind of said the same thing that I did, we think it's a bone bruise, don't worry about it, no biggie, and sent him off. And then 9 months later, he came to me and said, Mom, that lump is getting bigger and it's hurting more. And so we got x-rays, and at that point, his entire shin bone was eaten away by cancer.
Wow.
And it was an incredibly rare cancer that they'd never seen here before. There's only about 500 people on the planet who have ever had this primary bone cancer. And so we started this big, huge journey all over the country to try and find people who knew something about the cancer and could treat it in a way that sounded palatable.
Realized that most of his leg bone was gone.
Yeah, he had 23 and a half centimeters of tibia, which is the main weight-bearing bone in your leg, removed from his leg. So pretty much his entire shin bone was gone.
Yep.
And he had this incredible bone-stretching procedure done in New York City at Sloan Kettering, wherein he, over the course of a year, grew back that bone by us turning little screws. So he had this big, crazy metal frame that looked like some space alien thing. I'm sure you remember it.
Oh, absolutely, sure.
And then every day we turned these screws on the frame, and it would just pull.
He was literally on the rack.
Literally on the rack.
Right.
A millimeter a day from each end. So we grew 2 millimeters of bone a day for the entire time. And then that bone is like baby bone. It has no mineralization, and it's all soft. So then you're in the frame for a long period of time after that, having the bone harden up. And because he had, maybe 50 pins going through his leg.
Sure.
There's infection all the time. So he's in and on antibiotics and in and out of the hospital with infections all the time.
So jump ahead to this. He's now in this wheelchair, in this frame at camp, which he didn't want to go to.
Which he didn't want to go to, right. So trying to sell cancer camp to a 17-year-old, 18-year-old boy, not an easy sell. And he did not want to go. I took him up after he got out of the hospital, and Dina showed him around camp, and we showed him the ropes course and showed him everything. And he said, this just makes me not want to go more because it looks like everyone will be having fun except me.
Yeah.
And they assured me that he would have a good time and that he could do everything. And he didn't want to go. And I said, well, you're going because I think it's going to be better for you than lying at home in bed worrying. And if it isn't, you can come home, but you're not going to not go to camp. And so
it was the last chance you had to really exert your motherliness at this age, right?
Exactly.
By golly,
you're
this
going
is my
to camp.
last opportunity
This is the last
to force
stand.
you to do something.
Right. So I forced him to go to camp. He was really displeased with me, incredibly displeased with me.
Yeah.
And got to camp with what I'm sure was a sour attitude, and was 6 days post-op from a huge orthopedic procedure on tons of narcotic pain medicines, in pain. It was a terrible condition. I dropped him off at camp with the promise that he could come home if he wanted to. he had to come home to bathe because we had this whole elaborate bathing system.
Right,
Like
sure.
he couldn't get the leg wet.
Yeah.
And so we had sort of something set up so that he could bathe at home. So we made a plan that I would pick him up, a few times during the week, bring him home, he could bathe, and then I bring him back to camp.
Yep.
Or keep him home if he wanted to stay home. And so I picked him up after 24, 36 hours, something like that. And he bathed, and I said, do you want to stay home? Do you want to spend the night at home? What do you want to do? He's like, no, I got to get back to camp.
I've got things to do.
He bathed and he was out of there. And then when I picked him up from camp, he said, Mom, I wish I'd gotten cancer sooner so that I could have more years at camp. Because he knew it was a one and done.
Actually, he did. You just didn't listen to him.
Right, that's true. If I'd listened, he would have had 2 years at camp.
And actually, he's going to have many more years at camp.
Right, and he went back this summer as a CIT and had a wonderful experience doing that.
That's a counselor in training, for those of you who don't know.
Yeah, so it was 2 full years before he was cleared to start doing stuff. This September, his doctor held a fundraising event that he got a team of patients of his together to run in the Fifth Avenue Mile, which is a big real road race in New York City.
In Manhattan, right?
In Manhattan, down Fifth Avenue. And it's interesting because it's not a race for handicapped people, right? It's a real road race.
Yeah.
And so Abe got stuck in the 18 to 25-year-old male age group of runners who are like doing, their like high knee stretches.
Sure,
et cetera.
yeah.
Abe had never run. He'd never done a running motion since before his surgery, almost 3 years earlier. And so he got in this starting gate with thousands of people on Fifth Avenue with all these gunners, runners, and
strapping guys with no health problems.
And he ran the race, the Fifth Avenue Mile. It was only a mile, and he ran the race, and then he walked back up to the starting point, and then ran the race again as a team.
Twice.
But he ran it twice, so he did a total of 3 miles.
Amazing.
He said his leg felt fine, but his lungs were killing him.
Yeah, and we should mention too. I know that your family's been hit by cancer a number of times here.
Yes, yes. I was diagnosed with breast cancer about 1.5 years into Abe's journey, and I think when I was here last year, I was in the middle of chemo.
Exactly. I almost didn't recognize you when you
with
came
hair.
in.
I know.
Great.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
So the camp community and the cancer community are super important to families going through this, and especially I think for the kids, it's as adults, it's, I think, at least for me, very easy to sort of reach out and find a community.
Yeah.
But for kids, they feel really different, and there aren't very there are lots of women walking around with breast cancer, right? There aren't very many kids walking around that have had cancer. I mean, we know there's 70 a year in this community, right? So it's a hard thing for them.
It's hard enough just to be a teenager.
Right, exactly.
Throw cancer into that. And throw being a teenager, a 17-year-old boy, and you have no leg bone left.
Right. And you're disabled.
That's hard.
You're disabled and on crutches. And, So, we've been super fortunate in that, and not that we want other people to have cancer, but as you know, Braden, who's also from Colchester, was diagnosed shortly after Abe was. And Braden is the little brother of Thomas, who you guys have interviewed. I heard his interview from the summer on the radio, was a CIT last year.
Yep.
Thomas was Abe's best friend. So we have we've had friends that we've traveled this journey together with. And my youngest son right now, who his best friend was just diagnosed with lymphoma and will be coming to camp for the first time this summer.
Right.
And again, I don't know that a 16-year-old boy would necessarily go to camp, but we talked Braden into it, and he loved it, and I'm talking my youngest son's best friend into it, and
Good.
I have no doubts that camp will snag their imaginations and their hearts and souls, and be with them as an important part of their healing and their psychological process of having cancer forever. Because my kid won't go to a therapist to deal with,
doesn't need to. He's got camp.
Stuff. He's got camp, right?
That's
He doesn't need to. All he needs is camp.
Mario, thank you so much for coming in this morning.
You're welcome.
It's a
Thanks
wonderful
for having us,
story.
and thanks